this is the first time I think we've ever done anything like this, where we've tasted vertical of our probably our favorite wine that we make, our best Southern Rhone blend, Cuvee Foudre. And in this instance, we have 6 different wines from 2012, and then being the first one, and 2015 through 2019. The man on my right here made the last 5 wines. This is Jason Valenti, for you sports fans who only know him for his
for
parenting 2 amazing kids.
Oh, that's it. Still my only thing.
Yeah, me too. I get it. It's like, hang on to that.
So,
Yeah, what are your kids going to do?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
not going to follow my footsteps. That's one thing I know. Anyway, so Jason started with Unti in 2015. So you get kind of when you go, I sort of notice when I go through these wines that you get a little bit of his imprint, along with the fact that we've honed in on the 3 vineyards that we have.
And it was 12 was the second Foudre we ever made?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
So the first Cuvee Foudre we made was in 2005, and that was with. That was partly because we did some whole cluster ferment on the 383 clone Syrah and the 470 clone, and we liked it so much because it had so much of this Northern Rhone character. And 05 was, what were you doing in 05?
I was at Paul Hobbs. Yeah.
So 05 for us was a pretty full-bodied year.
Yeah.
Kind of reminded me of maybe 12 a little bit, only a little bit riper.
Absolutely, I think it's a great comparison.
And so we had some dark color, big tannins in 05.
Yeah.
So the Grenache and the Mourvèdre in 05 were pretty substantial, along with this component of whole cluster 383 clone and 470 clone. So that was why we did it, and that was also the first year that we bought the Foudres.
Ah, that was okay. That makes
so
sense.
we put the 3, the Alban clone Grenache, the Mourvèdre, that was the original Mourvèdre, and then the 2 Syrah clones into the Foudre, and that was why we did it.
Got it.
And that was it's not that dissimilar to how we do the blends for Cuvée Foudre today, where you would think this would be the wine that we would deliberate over more, and it kind of isn't.
One of the easiest ones to make.
Because the vineyard blocks are so strong, and they're so compatible, or at least they're capable of making a wine that both of us sort of envision is like Chateauneuf de Pape. That it ends up being one of the fastest blends.
For sure, sure. And actually, your dad was just in here tasting, and he remarked how similar, there was a strain of similarity between all those.
Right.
And that's largely because it really is mostly the same blocks of Grenache and Syrah Mourvèdre. I mean, here and there, there's tweaking. But
and there should be, though. I mean, to me, that's what I love about my favorite wineries in Europe that are of a similar makeup to us, where they're only sourcing fruit from their own vineyards that they've managed for who knows how long. And, so, for example, View Telegraph Chateauneuf de Pape, which is my favorite, you can tell it's their vineyard expression, much like our Benchland Syrah. For better or worse, you can recognize that. And I think that shows up in all of these wines, even the 12, which is a little bit more of an outlier.
So would you say it was and we've talked about this, it's in a way, whether we make Cuvée Foudre, it's kind of the Mourvèdre that drives that decision in some ways. Not completely, but making the Mourvèdre's got to be to a certain level for us to really.
Yeah, because we just don't, as you know, we don't have enough we don't have enough Mourvèdre that would be full-bodied and complex and substantial enough to be worthy of a wine like this.
Yeah.
So just as we have done since you've been here, when we feel like the Mourvèdre isn't up to this level, or isn't up to the level of blending in with our Grenache, Petit Frere, here it comes. And or if we feel like it's not going to happen in the vineyard prior to late August, we just go ahead and determine that that's going to go into rosé. But no, I agree. I mean, I think the Mourvèdre is sort of the X factor here. Having said that, I think Mourvèdre is not nearly as consistent in my mind, on our property
Yeah.
as the Alban Grenache or
I agree.
the 383 clone Syrah
Yeah.
has been, or any of the other Syrahs that we use down here.
Yep, I agree. So there's a set, like a six vintage gap essentially between 05, 7.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to dwell on that.
No,
too
no,
much.
no, 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 no.
I'll tell you why. I mean, some of it is just that we were still kind of not struggling, but finding our way with managing crop levels with Grenache.
Yeah.
That was the main.
Yeah.
That was the main, and Mourvèdre.
Yeah.
So we were ending up with many years, and 2012 is not that much different. We had many years where we were harvesting Grenache mid-October, and we were harvesting Mourvèdre after that.
Yeah.
You know, we had some years where we harvested Mourvèdre on Halloween.
Yeah.
And that was a function of us not managing our yields to be lower so that we could see if making this kind of wine was possible. So your point is really a great one in the sense that 05 and 012, 2012, it wasn't because we were that much better in the vineyard. Nature was great.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's a really great point, because that's how often we felt like we had a wine that was worthy of this blend when we weren't trying to be proactive in the vineyard to facilitate this more consistently.
Yeah.
But since you arrived, 2015, it's no coincidence in my mind that our vineyard program got much better with respect to these varieties in terms of managing the yield. And then we have an ability to see 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
Yeah.
And, maybe that happens naturally in the Rhone where you have over years soil types do this or whatever. Or vine age does this, and I think that's probably helping us a little bit now too. But, if you have young vine Grenache, it's going to be really vigorous. So you're going to have years where the crop level is more than what nature can handle to make the kind of thing you want to make. So that's why it's so much easier to make, or that's why it's common to find Grenache-based reds, especially when they're not over $30 a bottle, that are pretty light and fruity, and they're fine. They're not this.
No.
And so I think that's I really appreciate you bringing up the point. Therein lies why we wanted to embrace managing the crop levels, because I was frustrated that we would have a year like 05 or 7 or 12. Those are great vintages for Grenache. But in between, it was a definite ebb.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy, it's hard enough to market these wines anyway. So it's really hard when your quality is not, you can't rely on it.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, so let's taste the 12. This will be fun.
12,
And neither one of us have tasted, by the way, neither one of us have tasted these wines in this kind of a setting. You would think that as people who have wineries, we would do this every day, and we probably should, but we haven't done this. So this will be a maiden voyage of Cuvee Foudre vertical.
I'm trying to think the last time I had the 12. We did the Magnum party. We opened 12, but maybe.
And for those of you playing at home, it's your reaching the ebb of your holiday festivities by being bored with us for 45 minutes. I think you'll be shocked at how alive this 2012 is. It's a 10-year-old Southern Rhone blend from good old Dry Creek Valley, and it's living large today, I think.
It really is. And there's a viscosity and
Yeah.
still a real richness
The
to
vintage really shows.
It really does.
Up. Our 12 Benchland Syrah,
Yep.
our captains and stuff. No, it was like that. You know, all of our 12s were pretty strong.
Yeah,
12 Sangiovese,
really
12 multiple channel.
I mean, it really does have a lot of life left in it too. I mean, even in terms of the color, like I see it's a pretty intense color. It's next to these younger wines.
Yeah, I think in this case, well, no, maybe I'm sure the Grenache helped a little bit, but I think the 12 Syrahs from down here were really strong. I mean, I think that shows up here. Because this is, this 2012 is 40, 30, 30, which most of these are, except for the...
1 year we did 18. We did a little more Grenache. Yeah, 5 barrels.
But I think, you know, as I go through these, the 12 still has, to me, more Syrah dominated character, even though it's only 20%, right? Or
you know what? The 12, let's see. You have the, I think you have the sheet.
okay, so no, that makes sense. So it's 30%, but it's such a strong 30% that I think it's not as Southern Rhone spicy, red fruited as the other ones are, where the Grenache is a little more prominent for me.
And you said there's a little whole cluster, the 12s, a little whole cluster in the Grenache.
Yeah, we whole so that's a good point. So we whole cluster fermented everything. I mean a little bit of everything. So we whole cluster fermented Alban, Grenache. We didn't whole cluster completely. We did a similar thing to what we do now.
25% of each lot, No,
well, we did it with Mourvèdre too, and we did it with Syrah. So I mean, normally now we just do it with, with Syrah, and we don't do it with Grenache and Mourvèdre.
Got it. I mean, I find the tannins to be very opulent and ripe. I mean, this is really beautiful.
I wouldn't hold on to this wine for much longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a little more in it. I mean, I'm surprised. There's not like any tawny color on the edges or anything. It's.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that.
Yeah. And then we're on the 15.
So yeah, why don't you give me your thoughts on the 15?
Yeah, so 15 was the wine itself. I mean, 15 to me, I think one of the first things I think about with 15, that vintage, was just the low yields.
Yeah.
We had a really light set in the spring, and so that, I think, lent itself to like a concentration of the fruit, like an intensity.
Yeah, and you can see
that we got throughout, not just in the Cuvée Foudre, but all the varieties we work with.
15 Sangiovese.
And it's also more because it was a warmer year too. So we ended up taking, a lot of times our Grenache will come at the end of September, early October. This year we were more towards the middle of September. Yeah. Again, the light yield combined with the warmer temperatures just kind of.
Is that the earliest year since you've been here?
Since I've been here, that was the earliest. Yeah. And it's really
I remember because 2015, all these winemakers would be at Big John's Market here in Healdsburg in October. Everybody was done.
Yeah. No, I It's still got, again, we're on 7 years now, and it's still got that beautiful, expressive, red, brambly fruits, florals. It's still very rich on the palate too. There's a concentration. Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember what the individual Mourvèdre was like that year, but I think that's holding this wine. I mean, it's kind of holding this wine together. I mean, there's a meatiness to the Mourvèdre, there's a savoriness to the Mourvèdre that really offsets the ripeness of the Grenache, I think, or complements it.
There's always something kind of showy about the 15 vintage.
Yeah,
I still think that carries through.
Like
Yep.
And this is a wine that's like, I mean, it's still got structure to it, and you could hang on to it longer. I don't know why you would. I mean, it's really ready, really beautiful right now, I think. And that's the way I think a lot of our 15s are right now. So for us, 7 years to me, I think is a long time for any of our wines to go. But one of the things that I think, in addition to just having overall higher quality when you manage the crop levels, is that we're also getting a little more structure in the wine, regardless of the vintage, and then that's allowing these wines to have a little bit longer life.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to see the structure still
too.
there, because that's one vintage I would have picked that maybe would have
I agree.
been towards the end, it would have been the 15, just because it was so showy early on, but it's still holding together beautiful. And that and there we used the 3 different clones of Syrah. So we used 383, 174, and 877.
Cool. And those small vineyard blocks of Syrah are all located on the winery property. So we've never used the benchland Syrah for Cuvée Foudre, and I'm sure once you started making that wine in 2015, you easily saw why you wanted to use it. It would be
overpowered.
Yeah. We would all be talking about meaty wines here.
Yeah.
But I think that even though we preferred the Clone 383 for this blend, and I think the 174 and 877, especially since you've been here, have been really, really solid every single year.
Yeah, and really, there's another year. No bad. In 19, we also worked with the 174, 877. So great.
And I don't think it misses a beat. I mean, even though I'm in 383, when that vineyard block is right, it's my favorite. But I think it still maintains the overall style of this blend.
Completely. And again, that was 4 barrels of Grenache, 3 barrels of Syrah, 3 barrels of Mourvedre. So exact same blend.
Yeah.
In terms of quantity, is 12. We're at 16.
And to me, the 16 Foudre here is not dissimilar in terms of, it seems to have a little more firmness, a little more taut character, because it has a little firmer tannins and the acidity is really solid. So, I think these, what's the pH of this one?
16 is 378.
Yeah, I mean, that is, when we've done the numbers on Chateauneuf de Pape or Gigondas, that's actually kind of near the low end, meaning higher end acidity.
Mm-hmm.
When we're around 3.75 or between 3.7 and 3.8, we're not talking about wines that are flabby compared to the European versions.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if anything, these, and I think the 16 is a good example, it might be a little more taut.
Yep.
And that's not a classic California French comparison. Usually it's the other way around.
Yep.
Which is part of why we like this wine.
Yep. Yeah, and that's exactly where I was thinking. There's attention, and I think that comes from this vintage was I remember this being tricky for us because when we did a whole cluster with the Grenache, and I remember in the first tastings with that Grenache, we thought it was maybe a little backwards, and there was a lot of it was firm. I remember us making note of that enough to where we made the decision in the following vintages to pull back a little bit on that. But what I remember happening is there was a turning point for these wines that I think where they're now they really softened, and it happened early, and now I think there's still a firmness there, but I'm really happy with they're not aggressive tannins.
Yeah, so we probably should briefly explain whole cluster and what we mean by that. So one of the oldest ways to make red wine was whole cluster. You just take grapes and throw them into a tank and let them ferment, and then you're fermenting the wine with the stems included in the tank. And so a lot of folks, especially in Burgundy and the Rhone, practice this method even to this day. And in California, people have. Did you ever do that with Pinot Noir?
Yes. Yeah, we did. Yep.
And so people have done that with Pinot Noir and with Grenache based and Syrah, Grenache and Rhone varieties here in California. I mean, I guess what was your reason for doing it with Pinot Noir?
It was more stylistic. We were looking for structure for Pinot because Pinot doesn't have a whole lot of natural tannin, so it was a way of kind of adding some structure to it.
Yeah. So there's part of that would apply to Grenache. It really doesn't apply to Mourvedre or Syrah because we have plenty of structure there.
Yeah.
But so what we were doing it for is the aromatics that we would get from the stems, and that usually resulted in a more floral, peppery, spicy set of aromas. And we love that, especially with respect to the Rhone varieties, because they kind of already are headed that direction. This just amplifies it. But even before you got here, we were starting to notice the potential downside to leaving the stems in the tank, and that was they would absorb some acidity, and in the case of Grenache and Mourvedre, they would absorb some color.
Yep.
And with our Grenache, just like with Pinot Noir, I'm sure, you're kind of wanting to hang on to every shred of color you've got.
And acidity.
And acidity,
Yep.
especially
Yep.
you know, in California. So because of our warmer days. And so we started to pull back on that, and then really, I think, was it from 17 forward that we only did
the
whole,
Syrah
partial whole
component,
cluster
just the
with Syrah.
Syrah component.
And even then, it's only partial. So
Yep.
what I think what you do is we put a layer of whole clusters in a tank, and then,
exactly.
and then destem right on top of
Yeah.
that. So you get sort of a little. You're trying to walk that fine line between getting some of the benefit from the clusters, the stems being in there, without all of the downside of the stems being there. But that shows up in this wine, and I think all the way through, there's a little bit of that shows up in this wine.
And there's a spiciness to the to the 16.
I know. Yeah. And those, you know, people who love, like me, who love, you know, Gigondas and Châteauneuf-du-Pape. I mean, that's a feature that resonates with you because you get that in those wines often. Yeah, I'm impressed.
Yeah, really nice.
So on to the 17 here. I'm really struck by this wine's color. I don't remember this wine being darker than the 16. It looks that way today. It's kind of funny. I mean, I think the two vintages to me, or the 17 and the 19, have some similarities to me in terms of the vintage. We had some heat spikes.
In September.
Possibly a little bit of warmer nighttime temperatures in 2019.
Yep.
And they both seem to really play into this wine. It shows you that even Dry Creek is probably at the cooler edge of where you could consistently make a robust Châteauneuf-du-Pape style wine, because Mourvèdre, I mean, really would like a climate that's even warmer than, a climate that's warmer than what Dry Creek Valley has. But in 17 and 19, it seems like the Mourvèdre did get physiologically right, and it shows in this wine. So to your point about Mourvèdre being the
driving factor.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's a really heightened kind of floral aspect to the Grenache.
Yeah,
that's really
totally agree.
Yeah. I mean, the nose reminds me. There's almost like a similarity between the 15 and the 17 a little bit, and the I mean, different. It's not. I mean, the 17's not. The 17's a darker nose, but there's still a really beautiful, ripe character to it.
But I mean, probably acid-wise,
higher both 3.8. So
a little bit lower acid.
Yeah, lower acid. pHs went higher.
I mean, this is really turned into a voluptuous
wine. It has.
Terrible when you use these terms that you're not supposed to use, politically incorrect terms for wine tasting.
It's hedonistic.
Yeah. Also.
Yes.
I'm really enthralled with the aromatics. I mean, this is a Southern Rhone style thing. Whatever AOC you want to apply it to.
I'm trying to think. We have and then again, there was 4 barrels of Grenache, 3 barrels of Syrah, 383, and the 3 barrels of Mourvèdre, old vine.
To me, though, I don't know how do you. I mean, to me, contrary to the 16, the 17 just has this totally seamless, no rough edges, no. We both identified the 16 as still being taut, maybe a little structured still. So perhaps it'll start to pick up some of the seamlessness. But man, this wine is there's no rough edges. It's just gorgeous, really. And I'm sure it'll last longer. Go ahead.
Would you have predicted it to be at this
point?
No, me neither.
Not at all. I would have not thought that. I don't know. I just didn't realize it was still this firm. I always liked its kind of seamlessness, but I didn't realize it was going to be this sort of solid. 5 years after the vintage.
Yeah.
This is really a statement, I think, about those vineyard blocks.
And also a testament to how much Grenache needs, these varietals actually need heat. Because it was a warm September, and we actually harvested this late. This is the wines we're tasting today. This is the Grenache we harvested the latest. This was October 5.
And that was with some heat spikes.
That was with some heat spikes. Yep.
And low yield.
Yep.
So it's not like we were having
No.
big. I think that's another. You bring up another point that's really, really important with Grenache-based reds. I mean, and I've seen it with various people who've commented on this in the wine press, where some grape varieties lend themselves to being harvested at lower sugars, and most of those are more Northern European type things than Southern European type things. And, so maybe there's this desire among a lot of people, even myself, I'd love to have our wines be lower in alcohol than they are. But, just using that one measurement as a determining factor, you would miss some of the gorgeous character that is Grenache. And in fact, not only would you just miss it, it would be it's a negative, Grenache, when it's not physiologically ripe, can be green and thin and a little bit bitter, and it loses all of it loses the charm of what makes me attracted to the grape variety in the first place. So, these wines are not 12.5% alcohol. They're just never gonna be.
No,
they're always gonna be right at 15%. And in the past, people would say, "Oh my God, that's what California does. They produce 15% alcohol wines." I urge any of you to go to a store and find a Chateauneuf de Pape that sells for $70 and up, and tell me what the alcohol percentage is. It's going to be a minimum of 15, and the best ones are going to be 16.
Yeah.
And they're proud of that.
Yeah.
And those wines are big and dark, and they're using Mourvèdre and Syrah to kind of bring it back into some realm of balance, and as are we.
Yeah.
And I just think that it is very important for us to live, live with the devil that is yours.
Yeah.
And, I just think in general, Grenache needs to be ripe wherever it is. And that's true here too.
Yeah, and I think, at sugar levels where other varietals would be ripe, Grenache still has pink and green berries. So it almost mandates that your alcohols are going to be in the high 14s or 15s.
And that's very normal. It's normal in the Priorat.
Yeah, everywhere.
It's normal in Rioja. It's normal in the Rhone, and it's normal in Sardinia where they make Cannonau. And it's definitely normal here. Now there are some hipster winemakers trying to do lower sugar Grenache, and I think there's just a ceiling to how complex and compelling those wines are. Maybe they're perfectly drinkable like you would a declassified Burgundy or something like that. But
they're not a full expression of that.
No, I know. Otherwise we'd do it.
We'd do it.
Yeah. 17, bravo. That's really a good show.
Yeah, it is. So 18. And 18 was a very different vintage in that where 17 had heat spikes. 18 was, when I read my harvest notes, 18 was a wet, cool spring, and it was just mild through the summer, even through the harvest months of September and October. Which is unique because we tend to always get, it seems like a heat wave in September, at least one, and none of that happened. So it's just this very even vintage that really the vines almost told us when it was time to harvest. They started to shut down, and that helped us make our decision.
Yeah, there's a prettiness to the 18 that has always been kind of our customers. It's the first thing they notice. I mean, a lot of times when we're showing Cuvée Foudre in the tasting room, because it's a little bit more structured than Grenache, it's not going to particularly show as well in a setting like that. But the 18 always did.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I think we sold more of this wine just from people tasting it in the tasting room than any other vintage. And I can see why. There's a really prettiness of fruit. I mean, this is like purity of pure fruit.
And the wet spring helped because it kept our yields down, and that really made it like perfect for going through that more mild vintage.
Yeah, so we have moderate yield, you know, low yields with this, and then a longer growing season.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. There's a lot of detail to the
18. I know. 18 in general is one of my favorite vintages here, probably because of what you just said. Mm.
Just a lot of weight. Yeah.
So when you, I'm putting you on the spot here, but when you say detail, what does that mean to you?
You can see the difference. You can see the whereas like 17 was so effusive, and the fruit is just right, you know, kind of very upfront. Here you kind of see the lines between the floral aspects of the fruit, the you know the fruit aspects of, you know, the more fruity aspects of the fruit.
Yeah.
So there's just this level you can see just the lines between the different things going on in the wine.
Yeah.
And that carries through in the aromatics to me, and also the palate too.
Yeah, no, to me, it's really, there's a focused spiciness. There's it's easy to pick out the aspects of Grenache and Mourvèdre and Syrah, but in this case, it's really driven by Grenache. So it's easy to see, you know, why, you know, what's so interesting about Grenache. It's got red fruit, it's got pepper, it's got some Provençal herbs, and all of those things are noticeable.
Yeah,
it's not blown out by one ripeness of fruit, but it's really apparent when I taste this one.
And that's a better way of saying it.
But I mean, I know. But I mean, I love the word because it does, you know, help me remind me that, oh yeah, I can pick these things out. Whereas not so easy with some years that are so ripe, and they're the ones that are oftentimes the most showy. And the most press, you know, most press driven. And that happens in the Rhone too, especially in Châteauneuf, where they're making riper and riper years. I mean, these years that are just, you know, drought years, hot vintages in the summertime, and then they make this big, ripe, almost Zinfandel-like Grenache-based Châteauneufs. And it's not as easy to see the other things that drive you to Garrigue and the things that the other descriptors that people use for the best Southern Rhone reds. But I think this wine has
because a lot of that is ethereal, and when you get warmer, you know, really hot temperatures, a lot of that kind of almost just, you know, kind of not dissipates, but can flee away a little bit. Whereas in an even vintage like 18, it because there was no heat spikes, I think a lot of that gets retained.
I would have thought, you know, and maybe this will prove me wrong here, but because I think this wine is so balanced, I think it's going to be something that, you know, don't worry about how long it needs to age.
There's an ageability.
But it might surprise me. I think you know, the 17 is to me showing me that, because the 17 to me always seemed to be also something that I would want to drink right away.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how the 18 progresses from here. Okay.
All right, so 19. Yeah, beautiful nose.
I thought that when, as we just sent out an email for this, and of course because the purpose of that document is to get people to try these wines. I said I felt like this was perhaps our most Rhone-like vintage since you've been here, and I think it immediately, having even tasted this wine, just smelling it, that reminds me of Châteauneuf.
To me, it's almost like a balance between 17 and, you know, it's probably the most balanced of all these wines in terms of just, it's got that beautiful ripeness that I love in the 17 and the 15. yet there's still like a tautness and a power
Yeah, I
that
agree.
you get in the other vintages. It's beautiful. I mean, really, it's nice to see it in this light. In 19 wasn't a vintage too dissimilar from 18. I mean, it was moderate, but what it did have that 18 didn't was there were some more heat in September. You know, it had more heat spells, and again, I think that always benefits the Grenache.
Yeah, and there's a power to this wine. I mean, it's, you know, if you're, I guess it's probably good that you're tasting this wine at the end of this flight, because there's more tannin structure to this, but at the same time, it's got that really, persistent Grenache character that this really big, fruity, peppery element. I think the Mourvedre really plays strong in this wine. I mean, it shows you how important that variety is to a Southern rum blend. You know, one of the things that you see with these luxury cuvées of Chateauneuf now is that they're identifying their oldest vine Grenache vineyard blocks and just trying to make a mono varietal wine out of that, and that's their quote unquote luxury cuvée. And to me, and maybe those are big, compelling, Vin de Garde wines, but Mourvedre is what makes, there's that, it's like Reggie Jackson, it's the straw that stirs the, what is it? It's the straw that stirs the drink.
Well, I mean, I would say like I wouldn't necessarily say like Grenache on its own is a noble grape, or maybe Mourvedre. I mean, Syrah, that's arguable.
Yeah.
But I think the blend,
for
Grenache
sure.
Mourvedre is one of the noble blends of the world.
Excellent point. And that's another thing that, it's hard because people, to me, I love the concept of the tradition of, in French they would say multiple cépage, where it seems like as you go from north to south, it's more common to blend multiple grape varieties into a wine, because you're getting warmth and ripeness is maybe taking some of the detail out of the wine, so you're bringing it back in through another grape variety. It's like what we do with Zinfandel, where we know Zin is going to be at this, to do Zinfandel right, it's not much different than Grenache, where you have to pick it at a certain physiological ripeness, otherwise you're going to pay the price, and it's not going to be good. Whereas you can do that with, so you can do that with Zin, but I think if you want to make a balanced wine, you've got to have some other grape varieties like the Petite Syrah to kind of reel it back into some semblance of balance. And I think there's no question that Mourvedre for sure does, and Syrah does too, but both of those varieties really kind of keep Grenache toward the role of a noble wine instead of just a pedestrian one.
And add like a darker complexion to it.
Yeah, it makes it a more serious wine.
For sure.
Oh, it's 19 is. I'm glad to see. It's like it's almost like. Well, when you're in the.
You're writing.
When you're in the wine business, the new vintage is always your
best ever.
Your newest club. It always looks good. And in this case, it deserves it.
Which goes to your initial point when you started the video, is it'd be nice. We should do this more often for that reason,
And I guess we never really mentioned it, but Foudre, the term Foudre, is what the French call these barrels or these oak vessels that are larger than what they call a barrique. So the normal barrel you would see in a winery is what the French call barriques, or the Europeans call barriques, and that's a 60-gallon barrel. This Foudre is 10 times that, so it's 620 gallons. And you see these larger oak vessels in Southern Europe a lot. You see it in Italy, they call them boîtiers. And especially, I don't even know, and I don't know if you could have more information about this. I don't even know if it's a function of artistically they wanted to do it. I think it was more economically practical to have these larger oak
Larger oak
vessels,
barrel, yeah.
and for the longest time, most Southern European wines didn't command the prices
Yeah.
that Bordeaux and Burgundy
Yeah.
did, so you couldn't afford to spend the money on small oak barrels. So you had larger vessels, and it ended up working out great because the Southern European wines are fruitier, tend to be fruitier, riper, more expressive early on, and then that size helps retain that and maintain that.
Yeah.
But I think now you're starting to see more and more producers as the wine prices go up.
Yeah.
They're using barriques, and I don't know. I mean, personally, with this genre, with the Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, I still think that size plays well.
It does. And one thing to note, like, these wines will start out in the barrique. We'll make our
Excellent.
blending tastings, and then we'll move them probably in early spring to the Foudre.
And why is that?
And well, the Foudre to me it serves a function. I mean, I think there's probably some cost. Historically there might be some cost reasons involved, but I like the Foudre because I feel like when you're dealing with, especially with Grenache, it doesn't have a whole lot of natural tannin, so the barrique for too long would tend to maybe oxidize the Grenache, whereas when you go into these Foudre, they're much thicker staves, and they let oxygen in, but at a much slower rate than the barrique.
And the mass of wine that doesn't touch the surface.
Yes, but yet you wouldn't want to go into a stainless steel tank because you still want some oxygen to come in. So I think, to me, the Foudre serves a real important function for this blend.
And that's, it's interesting that's been sort of our evolution with I mean, that's a normal process with these wines. I know when my dad visited View Telegraph, they actually finished their last 6 months, and I think they bottle after 18 months.
Yeah.
Their last 6 months are in concrete.
Which we've talked about. I think I think that would be a totally reasonable option. Actually.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. I mean, we make sure to ferment, like, when possible. We try as much as possible to ferment the Cuvée Foudre lots in concrete because we like this. We like what it does for the fermentations. Just the even, brings an even fermentation. It lets a little more oxygen into the fermentation in the stainless steel tank.
Doesn't allow any.
Yeah, exactly. So there. I mean, but I think aging in concrete would be a good option too.
But I like that, but their progression is the same. Where you're kind of, you feel like during, because I think one of the things that we were reluctant to go straight into Foudre with, especially with Syrah, is that the mass of wine, and because of the lack of oxidation, you get reductive character out of Mourvèdre and Syrah. Not so much. We never have reduction with Grenache, but both Mourvèdre and, as we know, both of those great varieties, reduction is not a stranger to this place. And so the reduction means when you get wine that's kind of in on itself, it starts to be more like hydrogen sulfide. Or these are off aromas from the wine getting reduced in its aging vessel, or just not having enough air wherever it is. And so fermenting early on, when you have the potential for reduction in a smaller vessel, and then moving it into the larger one, I think it's a logical progression for these type of wines.
Absolutely. And another important note, when they're in the smaller barrels, we never use new oak because it would tend to overwhelm especially the Grenache component.
I agree.
I mean, Syrah can handle new oak. I even think Mourvèdre probably can to some degree. But I think the Grenache needs to definitely be a neutral.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because part of it, when people are using new oak barrels to age wine, especially in California, where we're so driven by two varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir, and both of those varieties really benefit from new oak. With Pinot Noir, why would you say Pinot Noir benefits from new oak? Tannin?
Yeah, add some structure,
or
add
is
some
it just
palate. I think there's stylistic decisions
tradition that's
too.
similar to Burgundy?
Exactly. I think but you got to be careful with it too. I mean, we noticed that you can overwhelm Pinot Noir with too much.
What was your normal amount of new
Oh
oak
boy,
and
it,
the best
depend,
wines
it
that you
depended.
were?
I mean, here's the whole thing. It's not all new oak is equal. We know that. So it's about really spending a lot of time finding the right coopers, the people who make the barrels, and the most respectful to that fruit. So that's a big part of the challenge. And to me, we didn't really exceed 50%. You know, maybe sometimes we'd make the decision with certain vineyard designates that were made from a clone that was bigger version of Pinot that could stand up to the oak. We'd pair it with 50%, but for the most part, you know, we were hovering between 30 and 50.
But in the case of Cabernet, Cabernet doesn't have anywhere near
the primary fruit.
So like when you were making Cabernet at Adamus, I mean, I'm sure oak is adding adding aromatics. It's adding some layer of complexity. Whereas to me, Grenache has got so many things going on.
You don't want to lose that.
That you don't want to have oak overwhelm those things and narrow the flavor and aroma spectrum. Whereas Cabernet, it enhances it.
Absolutely.
And it's it's just a different animal. That's why you have to kind of go through the experience of learning what is best, and that takes a long time.
It sure does. It sure does.
That's why we have all these different.
These different runs.
I'm sure you appreciate all the different.
I love it.
Things.
It's a dynamic harvest. You're never bored.
No, I'm sure. It's true. He has a high market value right now. Nobody makes more varieties in a smaller space. From different vineyard blocks.
And varieties that have a real future in California.
Also varieties that other people don't even know about.
Right.
Want to wrap up some general thoughts here, guys? What we've learned, what we think of the blend in general.
Right.
No.
Personally, I mean, I think I'm kind of struck by the consistency and the strength of the Alban Grenache our best Grenache vineyard blocks are capable of absorbing 60% of other things and still carrying a Southern Rhone Grenache based personality. I mean, to me, I think that's one of my first thoughts. The other thought too is that when we started this, it was with our holy grail of chasing the dream of making a wine that we would consider worthy of Chateauneuf. And I think these wines absolutely, like I've said many, many times, if you throw them in a competitive flight with high-end Chateauneufs, this would not get laughed off the table.
Oh, heck no. In fact, we know it hasn't.
In many, other situations, it's actually been appreciated more because of the fruitiness and because of some of the balance that we have when we were talking about the acidity or the lower pH.
Cooler nights here.
And I think our balance, and our ability to get the kind of flavors that we love about Southern Rhone. And I'm struck by every one of these wines has something that I would say, I'm not sure it's from California.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I was struck by is, because I know we made tweaks here and there, but I think these wines are a great reflection of the vintage.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they really reveal the climate, the weather, the weather and the climate, and I think that's always great to see. I mean, that's what you want.
Or at least, that's what we want.
We want,
And that's not necessarily what, a larger producing winery would. Because, it's easier to get away with appreciating the nuances of the vintage when you make 265 cases a year than it is when you start making 26,000 cases. And people go, then people go, God, this 17 is nowhere near the 16. It's a vintage difference. I don't like it. So you're sitting on inventory. I mean, it is. No, that's a real. I appreciate you bringing that point up, because part of why you follow smaller artisan producers is that they appreciate all of what's going on here, not just the fact that we've been able to smash, create this square peg wine every single year. You appreciate the challenges that come with all those vintages. You learn about how to overcome that, and then it's like music. You're appreciating the difference between you know, that concert and this concert
Yeah.
and this concert
Yeah.
and this concert, and
Yeah.
and they're all interesting.
Yeah.
But there's some, you know, it shows you that it's still an alive dynamic. It's
Totally.
not just a factory.
No, absolutely.
Very cool. Well,
Happy holidays.
enjoy. Yeah, happy holidays
Yeah.
from a intoxicated crew.
There you go.
Too.
Yes, that's true. Feeling that a little bit. Take care.
All right, thank you again.
Robert, thank you.